Hey losers, Para here. You might have seen that my newest level, Untitled Unmastered, was recently rated, and I thought it'd be cool to make a video going over how it was made. As of recording this, my level is the hardest rated level under 1000 objects, making it the most optimized extreme demon. You might have seen that POC recently released a video showing the techniques used to make their own 45 object level called roaming, and I thought it was super enjoyable to watch, so I wanted to make something like that. So, without further ado, this is how I made Untitled Unmastered. To start off, I think it'd be a good idea to go over the level's conception. Anyone familiar with Untitled Unmastered might also be familiar with Lexi's level, Shy. This level should be considered the original 1000 object extreme demon, and for what it's worth, I think it's a really novel idea. I get that Levolution has been around for a while, but I don't remember anyone making an extreme demon that was this optimized until Shy. I think Lexi should be credited for being the first to do so. I do recommend checking out their level if you haven't already, since from what I've heard it's really fun to play. Looking at Shy, you can probably notice that most of the decoration in this level comes in the form of these oversized objects. These objects were scale hacked to be much larger than they normally can be, and it turns out this is actually a super common practice for optimized levels, and something you'll see in my own level. Unfortunately, several people thought that this level wasn't the best looking, which resulted in Lexi posting this challenge on Twitter to make a better looking extreme demon under 1000 objects. I thought that this would be a fun challenge, and so Untitled Unmastered was born. I think it'd be worth going over what levels I took inspiration from, so you guys have a better idea of how I executed my ideas. You might recognize this level from POC's video, but this is blefuscu by Rainbow. This is a 100 object level that has really intricate looking designs, and at a glance you would not think that this level was under 100 objects. It turns out, however, that most of the objects in this level are actually made out of text. This is thanks to Font 9, which has these really strange looking characters that can create these really large, intricate designs at the cost of only a handful of objects. While using text as designs in low object levels isn't anything new, I thought it'd be helpful to use this idea in my own level. This might not be someone you'd expect to see on this list, since abstractdark isn't really someone that comes to mind when you think of optimized levels, but it turns out he has a super important role in shaping Untitled Unmastered. A common trope that you'll see in abstractdark's levels is a very fast spinning circular background, which helps make the level feel much more intense in certain areas. Some levels that come to mind are Energetic Stream, Formidable Guardians, and most recently Time Warp. I figured that having a background like these could help make up for the lack of objects, and it turns out several people have already tried this concept before. This includes Quid with their level Watch It Flow, and Overdefa with this random preview of theirs. In any case, I had most of the tools I needed to make my own level. While the specific song I chose for Untitled Unmastered wasn't vital for its creation, I do want to point out some details about it that certainly helped make the level better, in my opinion. I knew going into this project that I wanted a song that was repetitive, which would allow me to use the same gameplay over extended periods of time. More importantly, however, is that I wanted a song that had good progression. One thing I've noticed about a lot of low object levels is that they seem to have the same intensity throughout. I get that you don't have as many objects to work with, but I wanted to make sure my level didn't do this. I think one of the most important parts of any level is to make sure that it matches the intensity of the song. Levels like blefuscu and roaming make good use of this concept, and I wanted to make sure my level represented any nuances in the music. With all this said, I ended up using Scarlet by Korai for this level, but I'm sure plenty of songs would have fit my description. I think I'm going to divide this video up into sections that focus on each part of the level, since I'd rather talk about each one individually. I had a lot of trouble with the first ship originally, since I didn't know how I wanted to make the gameplay for this section. I ended up using spawn loops to create this kind of sinusoidal gameplay that I come to like, and I built my decoration around this. This entire part hinges on these 39 triggers, which seems like a lot, but I was able to get 25 seconds of level out of it. I could have easily used fewer triggers here, but I wanted to add little details that weren't normally present in such optimized levels. Stuff like these moving detail blocks and these oscillating invisible blocks were nice touches in my opinion, and overall I like how claustrophobic this part feels. Speaking of which, you might have noticed that these two main structures repeat themselves periodically, and the reason you can't see them normally is because of the overlay I added, which serves a few purposes. Not only does it obviously hide the structures whenever they instantly move, but also it helps add to this claustrophobic feel I was going for. I was able to squeeze in this masking effect that makes the structures appear to change shapes as they pass by, something that was heavily optimized using the spawn loop I mentioned earlier. One last thing I want to point out are these oversized outline blocks, which are hacked to be 10 times the size they normally are. I didn't want to depend on oversized decoration for this level, since it can end up looking rather crusty, but using these outlines allowed me to make gameplay that uses significantly fewer objects than normally. This is something you'll end up seeing in later parts. Including the objects at the start of the level, this part uses 46 triggers and 134 objects for decoration, for a total of 180 objects so far. This second part is probably the least impressive section out of the entire level, but it does serve an important role in building up tension. The gameplay isn't anything too special, as it uses the same technique of moving structures forward to create a loop. The same overlay from before is being used to hide these movements so that it looks continuous. You might have noticed that I actually reused my spawn trigger from before to add pulses to the lasers. I'm also using oversized invisible blocks to add a bit of irregularity to the decoration, since the part is rather bland as it is. Halfway into the part, the screen begins to pulse rapidly since I wanted to add a build up to the drop. This was done with the spawn loop that lets the pulses fade in over time. This part adds another 93 objects for decoration, 24 triggers, bringing our total object count to 297. The drop is easily the most technical section of the level, and a lot went into making this part as intense as needed. The repetitiveness of the song really helped with making gameplay, since I was able to loop sections repeatedly to make something that ended up flowing really well together. Most of the hitboxes in this part are made up of scaled up slope outlines, which also serve as the base for my designs. You might have noticed those oversized outline blocks I mentioned earlier being used again, and the reason for that is because they prevent the gameplay from being messed up from inverted slopes. For example, here's the gameplay with and without the fix. This section has two separate block designs, and you might have realized I ended up using text to make some of the accents. While I only used the slash character in this level, I was able to use text on 3 separate occasions in this part. There's a custom ground in this level that closes in on you the closer you are to the edges, and I used text to add a border that looks super cool when it vibrates like it does here. This effect kinda sucked to make though, since it uses collision blocks to toggle portions of the border in and out, but for 20 objects worth of decoration and 23 triggers, I can't really complain. I also added these cute little arrows made out of these slash characters to help fill in space, and these added another 4 objects in decoration and 7 triggers. The star of this part is definitely the background though, which I think does a great job of adding intensity to the drop. By spinning these crosses at super high speeds, I'm able to make after images that make it look like there's way more objects than there actually are. Using a bounce and easing also lets the crosses rotate in a funky way, adding an extra kick to the background. With everything tallied up, we're looking at an extra 78 triggers and 193 objects in decoration, for a total of 568 objects so far. The fourth and final section of this level isn't too different from the third one, but there are some key changes that help progress the level. Besides the new game modes, this part relies on a new linear block design made up of slope outlines and 3D lines. However, scrolling through this level in the editor shows that most of the gameplay in the last parts of the level are gone, which is strange because the UFO gameplay changes halfway through the part. This is because I manually moved structures into different positions to account for the new gameplay using triggers. While this was a pain in the ass to do, this helped further optimize this level, so it was worth it in the end. The wave parts aren't anything to write home about, but I'm happy that they break up the regularities in the gameplay and block design. The other main difference between this and the last part is the inclusion of these spitting lines in the background. I've actually done something similar in my other recent level, Hypermania, and I think the lines here add much needed change to the background. Anyways, with 45 new triggers and 334 new decoration objects, our final object count for the level is 947. Making this video has made me realize that even though I'm happy with how Untitled Unmastered turned out, there's certainly room for improvement. If I were to make this level again, I would definitely spend much more time optimizing my triggers, since in hindsight I didn't do the best job I could have. For example, instead of using multiple triggers to move gameplay around in earlier parts, I could have made a spawn loop to do that for me. I also should have made the gameplay much more bearable, but other than that, I'm still stoked that the level turned out as well as it did. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a rather controversial level, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Other than that, take care, and get out of here.